Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers. It's October 11, 2018. All managers are present. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board in a matter that's not on the agenda or that's on the consent agenda? Or otherwise, okay, good. Moving on to the agenda itself, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Would you make the amendment real quick?
Certainly.
Could I just give an update on public meeting I went to last night?
Sure. There's a motion, Manager Sheckman, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the consent agenda, we have approval of the September 27, 2018 board minutes, and that is the only item. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll also, under board updates, strike operations and programs committee meeting because there wasn't one. And Citizens Advisory Committee, we're going to punt to the administrator for that. By way of my report, the Metro Mod meets next Tuesday. I'm the assigned member. And a couple of the items on the agenda are a discussion, a report on the Metro watershed-based funding and some next steps outlined by Kevin Begalke. Any manager may attend, of course, and the subsequent meeting will be in January, and there it's Manager Olson who's assigned to attend. Manager Shackleton?
Last night there was a Citizens Advisory Committee meeting for the Lake Hiawatha Golf Course Master Planning Committee. And it was, I think the biggest takeaway from that is they've created an agenda that would have a decision by July, I think, of next year. And just as that's the biggest news that came out of that.
Okay.
It was just nice to see a timeline for once that hopefully will be workable.
Thank you. The upcoming meeting and event schedule is printed in our agenda. Notice that the meetings in November are front-loaded in the month because of the holiday. And we'll move to item 9.1, which is a presentation on the impoundment of Judicial Ditch 2. And I will open the public hearing. Ms. Brown, welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, President White and managers. Leading into the public hearing on the impoundment of Judicial Ditch 2 or 6 Mile Creek, wanted to provide a brief presentation and background on the project. This impoundment is being proposed as part of the 6 Mile Creek Halstead Bay Habitat Restoration Program. The district has received about $600,000 in funding from Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council for carp management across 6 Mile. And the strategies that we'll be implementing through that program include adult biomass removal, aeration of the shallow lakes, and the construction of 4 barriers throughout the subwatershed. One of those proposed barriers is located between Mud Lake and Halstead Bay in 6 Mile Creek, adjacent to Highland Road. And at this location, 6 Mile Creek is a judicial ditch, Judicial Ditch 2, for which MCWD is the drainage authority. And here's a map of all of our judicial ditches, including Judicial Ditch 2, 6 Mile Creek. The process for proposing an impoundment within a judicial ditch is spelled out in Minnesota Statute 103E.227, and the steps are spelled out here on this slide. First, the petition is filed with the Drainage Authority. In this case, it's a district project being filed with the district as drainage authority. So staff developed a petition that the board accepted at the September 13th meeting. Following the acceptance of that petition, following the approval of that petition, the board then accepted the petition and directed the district engineer to prepare a hydrologic report on the impact of that proposed barrier, also ordered on September 13th. The engineer's report was then filed on September 19th with staff, and at that point, staff noticed this public hearing, sent out notice to affected property owners on October 1st. Following the close of the public hearing, as a separate agenda item, if the Drainage Authority does find that the proposed barrier provides a public benefit and does not impair the utility of the drainage system for landowners, then I would ask the board to consider authorizing the impoundment at this meeting as well. Before we open for a public hearing, I wanted to just briefly hit on the results of the engineer's report, which were included in your packet. So WINC modeled the impact of the barrier under the 10 and 100-year storm events and found no change under the 10-year event and an extremely minor increase under the 100-year event. The modeled change is 0.17 feet. And you can see on this map that the blue line, the red line is the existing high water level, and the blue line is the new 100-year level with the barrier in place. And the impact is only in that small area between Highway 7 and Highland Road. The engineer's report also found that the proposed barrier would not impair the utility of the drainage system, nor would it deprive the owners of the benefit of the drainage system. So I can field questions from the board. You'll also have an opportunity under item 12.3 when I'm seeking authorization to approve the impoundment at that time.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public who wishes to speak? This is a public hearing. I see no hands, so we'll close the public hearing. And then we'll move to item 10 point. Should we skip ahead to your other item maybe? Let's see here.
Sure. It's an item 12.3.
11.3. Let's go ahead to 11.3 and keep them together.
Great, so I don't have any further slides for this, but we are seeking authorization of the impoundment within the ditch here. And the barrier will come back before you as a permit application at the final meeting of October 25th. But at this time, we're just seeking the authorization under 103E.
Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 18107?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus, are there any questions or comments? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will hear item 10.1, which is permit 18-433. Ms. Showalter.
Thank you, President White, managers. So I am presenting this evening on the Arden Park project, as it's a district project, and those are considered by the board. Because I believe you're all fairly aware of this, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. So I'm going to briefly touch on all the applications of the rules, and then go into a little more depth on the requested exception from the wetland protection rule, and close with the staff recommendation. So the first rule that's triggered is the erosion control rule, and conformance with that has been demonstrated through the use of erosion control best management practices, including both in-water and upland strategies. Next is the floodplain alteration rule, and this rule is triggered whenever there is work proposed below the 100-year high water elevation. As most of the park is currently in the 100-year high water elevation, the rule is triggered by most of the project. And this project is a little bit unique because instead of just creating storage, this project also lowers the 100-year flood elevation and substantially reduces the footprint of the floodplain. So the image on the left is the existing floodplain, and the image on the right is the proposed. And so because there's no loss of flood storage and the 100-year high water elevation is not increased, it's in conformance with this rule. We're also requesting I'm also recommending that the board make a decision on the Wetland Conservation Act application. Because this project is proposing work in wetlands, it's regulated under the WACA. The image on the left shows the existing conditions, the wetland types, and then the right is with the restored stream channel and the new wetlands. There are some marked differences. So first, that dark green area on the existing conditions is marsh, which is supported by the existing impoundment in the dam. By removing the dam, it's not possible to sustain a marsh habitat. And so additional wetland will be created that is sedge meadow and floodplain forest. And the vegetation management that's taking place as part of the project will create wetlands that are of greater value than the existing wetlands. So the project meets no loss criteria as a project undertaken by a public agency for the purpose of wetland restoration. Next, the shoreline and stream bank stabilization rule is triggered for the stabilization of the new creek banks and also for the creek access points. Most of the banks will be stabilized through biologic means alone. However, just upstream of the 54th Street Bridge, there will be use of some riprap. So in the blue area immediately before the bridge, it'll be a full sheet of riprap, so going all the way up the bank, but it'll be interplanted. And then the green area will be just stone toe, so there'll be boulders, and then there'll also be vegetation above. And the reason behind that is to protect the existing infrastructure, and there's the velocity of flows in that area are fairly high. And because the shear stress calculation does not meet the threshold for bioengineering, the applicant has requested design flexibility for the reasons I stated. And then the creek access points were determined to be the minimal impact solution and therefore are in conformance with the rule. Also, the project triggers the dredging rule for the removal of the dam and accumulated sediment. The rule allows public agencies to dredge things for public purposes, and as we are a public agency and we are doing this for a public purpose, it is allowed under the rule. Next is the water body crossings and structures rule. So this rule regulates anything that comes in contact with the bed or bank of public water. And so there are two bridges proposed. The southerly one is replacement of the existing bridge, and then the northern bridge is new. Additionally, there is a section of boardwalk. And so those structures meet the navigation, hydraulic, and wildlife crossing criteria. And the applicant has submitted analysis demonstrating a public benefit and that they are the minimally impactful solutions. Additionally, the project is going from 4 outfalls to 2 outfalls. The northerly one is going to stay in place. They're marked with stars. And the southern one is a new outfall, which is the discharge point for the stormwater features. The stormwater management rule is triggered and treatment is required for the new impervious area aside from the trails which are exempt from treatment. And so the swale system will be accepting runoff from the new park structure in addition to taking regional stormwater. So it's a treatment train approach with a proprietary pretreatment structure and then a series of swales that will result in 33 pounds of annual phosphorus removal and a reduction in runoff rates. Finally, this project has requested an exception, and the rule states that the managers may grant an exception if a project affords a greater degree of water resource protection than would be provided through strict compliance. And in this case, the applicant is requesting an exception from both the minimum buffer width and the total buffer area. So to meet the buffer width, the buffer provision, a 75-foot wetland buffer would be required on all wetlands. In this case, so this slide is showing you kind of an existing to proposed conditions, and on the left you see the existing conditions, and the red areas are areas that do not currently require wetland buffers because there isn't any wetland fringe on the stream. And by virtue of creating additional wetland, the area that is required to have buffers is increased somewhat. And so the applicant has provided a plan for the buffer that involves the two shortfalls previously referenced. And for comparison, the existing condition is also shown, showing several areas, a pretty substantial amount of area where there is no naturally maintained buffer area. And then just kind of highlighting the areas where the 50% buffer width is not met in red. So that area is shrinking down quite a bit. The main areas where that is not being met are the existing hockey rink, which is being retained, and the playground area. And in order to meet the recreational needs of our project partner, it was determined that sacrificing the playground or the hockey rink were not feasible, and moving the hockey rink further from the creek would result in a substantial amount of tree removal and grading, and which would contribute to greater environmental harm. And so to determine whether or not this affords a greater degree of water resource protection, to analyze that against the purpose of the buffer provision, which is to provide for habitat adjacent to water resources and to treat stormwater. So the addition of the new stormwater swale system will provide a much greater amount of stormwater treatment than would be afforded by the wetland buffer. And the restoration of the wetlands and the natural areas management plan for the uplands will create much more habitat than would be the case by just having a uniform 75-foot buffer without that active management. And so if the board finds sufficient justification to grant the exception, staff recommends approval of the permit with the conditions and stipulations listed in the permit report.
Thank you very much. Let us first have a motion to approve
Move approval.
the exception. Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus, any questions about the exception? Manager Olson?
Oh, no, not the exception.
Okay. Those in favor of granting the exception, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then to the permit with the exception, we have a motion to approve the permit.
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus, questions then? Manager Olson?
On that shore stabilization ahead of the bridge over
Yeah.
the road, right there. In the event that we have a 2014 water level, the water at both sides of that road would be roughly the same level. Yet we don't have any provision on the downside of that bridge to stabilize that shore. Is that bank so gentle that it'll just stay in place?
So that's a great question, Manager Olson. So the primary justification for that riprap is because of the pressure that would be exuded on the shoreline upstream of the bridge by virtue of the water hitting the bridge abutments and then scouring back.
Right.
And so on the downstream side, the water won't be scouring back. And so therefore, I think that there is some rock in that area, but it's certainly not particularly organized riprap.
Have we ever had freezing or ice pile up against that bridge and form a dam? Like if we have frazzle ice in the winter and then the ice lets loose?
Manager, also managers, no, I mean, and that's the main reason why we keep the dam closed, is that we don't have that builder, so there's just some small runoff that comes through that area. But
Great. Okay, thank you.
And I'll add also onto the reason why the issues, We're also dropping the water level 4 feet in that area right by there, so the water will get concentrated, which is why we have the riprap. And then there's an expansive amount, the channel cross-section gets much wider downstream, so there's a greater area to spread that flow out, which is why you don't need a lot.
Great, thank you.
And when you mentioned closing it down, you meant Grays Bay Dam.
Correct, yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Not our-
Anything else?
What did?
Any other questions
Or
for
X dam.
Ms. Showalter? All those in favor of granting the permit, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, managers.
We have 2 items regarding Arden Park restoration, 2 resolutions, and we'll move through them together with Ms. Clark presenting. I misspoke, of course, we have 1 item right now. We've already done the first one on Arden Park.
Chair White, Board of Managers, before you is the final design report for the Arden Park Restoration Project with staff's requests to solicit bids for construction. Also included in your packet was the draft operations and maintenance plan. That's expected to come forward in final form with a maintenance agreement for recording at the end of the project. Staff is working on bringing that hopefully with bids later on in November. I will cover quickly the project design goals, review project plans, and then review our construction costs and project budget. The project was, as I went into some detail in the packet, but the project was initiated really at the end of 2013 when the district began, as in accordance with our CIP, looking at this reach and the upstream reach for how we can improve Minnehaha Creek in this area. And we developed, through feasibility, some conceptual ideas for bank stabilization. In 2014, City of Edina began looking at replacement of the West 54th Street Bridge, which we know intersects with this existing dam. And that's when we explored dam removal and a fish bypass pipe in order to improve the condition of, simply fish passage. With some public opposition and, really with removing the dam, and then with the limited benefit of dam removal without restoration of the creek and its corridor, it was the decision of the board to abandon those project ideas and move forward in partnership with the City of Edina that looks at a more holistic creek restoration in conjunction with city goals for the park. And that's when in 2016, the district and the city entered a memorandum of understanding to develop the concept plan for the park, of which some 4 specific goals were identified, and implemented a public process to develop that concept plan, resulting in the more specific goals reflecting our agency's shared goals and as well as the public's goals. The public really focused on keeping the rustic character of the park and their appreciation for nature that space provides, improving community and public connections to water and the surrounding corridor was important. Updating park facilities was important to the city and the community. The aging shelter building and playground, public safety was important. And then our shared concerns for the biological integrity of the creek in this area and improving water quality as a result of increased urban runoff over time. There was an extensive public process. It included 4 community meetings. 2 of those were in the park, social media updates, 9 email updates, 4 fact sheets, an email listserv which people could sign up to receive. Sarah Bamani and Telly Mamayak in our office coordinated really closely with City of Edina communication staff and really did a lot of work on the communications throughout the concept and project design process. Looking at this site, 1940 is one of the earlier, more clear photos. I'll show how the site's changed over time. We can see the dam is already in existence. There's a remnant meander bend, and pay attention to the top arrow as we flash forward to the 60s, which is now the location of the playground. You can see where the creek's been already moved. The center arrow shows the free skate area where the oaks are today, and then again, the dam is still in place. Some overall review of the project layout. Coming out of concept plan, we had a even more curvy, sinuous creek proposed. As a result of public input and the district's desire to, effectively mitigate the ecological impacts while being cost effective, avoiding trees, we came up with this new creek alignment after 30%. We're in total restoring 2,150 feet of creek and increasing the length of the channel by 230 feet. As Elizabeth pointed out, we've got stormwater management that frames the park from Minnehaha Avenue in the residential neighborhood, and 3 new creek accesses. Today there's only the access in the north. And then we're removing the dam at West 54th Street. Also, to naturalize the stream channel through this area, we're removing an existing concrete slab below the 54th Street bridge. This is looking, if you are standing at the dam and if you look to the left underneath the bridge, you can see portions of that slab, and now downstream, the jagged edge on the right of the picture shows the end of the concrete slab. Removing this will create a naturalized creek bottom throughout. It will not impact the structural integrity of the bridge. Elizabeth reviewed our creek access points, which we have covered in previous presentations. They will be similar to what's been shown on this picture, with the exception of using limestone block. The technical detail shows, I think looking at the picture above, what it looks like in plan view from above. Most notably, the kind of wings shown are limestone sitting blocks. This will all be pretty field fit and then enhanced with vegetation to create a naturalized setting here. Stormwater, Elizabeth also reviewed, but as you recall, there's a little over 80 acres that come in through the north end of the park, which we are treating with the project. There'll be the underground proprietary structure. Again, it's about a 7-foot by 14-foot concrete structure that removes floatables and sediment. Low flows will go through the stormwater swales, which will be intensely vegetated and maintained, and then those swales will outlet through a 6-inch drain tile into the creek. There are 2 crossings of the...
Can I ask how that's how that works? You say low flow goes to the, it doesn't go into the treatment facility first?
So it goes into the treatment facility, and within there's a weir blocking flow to the main outlet to the north, pushing it through the smaller pipe into the swales.
Thank you.
And then when water fills up above the weir, it spills out again, still heading north. As I've shown before, 2 boardwalk crossings of the swales incorporated into the city sidewalk will occur. And then overall, the project is treating 84 acres of stormwater, removing 33 pounds of phosphorus annually, as well as 1,800 pounds of sediment annually. I'll overview trails. There's a combination of trails that are new and shared cost between the city and the district. They are what we call the nature trail through the floodplain forest in this location. That's a crushed granite rock trail, 2 to 3 feet in width. That'll be field fit during construction, connecting to the city's sidewalk on Brookview. And then also nature trail we're calling, which is a shared cost, is the loop up to Brookview Avenue. This includes the bridge and boardwalk. And I will note that for later in the presentation, that north piece of work is a bid alternate in terms of bidding the project. City trails funded by city funds include a new sidewalk along Brookview for public safety and a new trail entrance from Minnehaha Avenue to the center of the park, which doesn't exist today. Renewed trails by the city include the main arterial trail, as we've called it, which reduces the slope of this trail, making it more accessible through the center of the park, the new bridge, and a realigned trail north of the creek responding to the facility upgrades. There's an existing trail along Minnehaha Avenue. It's a concrete sidewalk, about 300 feet of this sidewalk to the north along the stormwater swales will be rebuilt and incorporated into the stormwater swale construction. There are 2 new bridges similar to the design shown. The South Bridge, the big bridge, is a 64-inch span and 10 feet wide. It's a steel truss bridge. We won't have the wavy line under the handrail, but otherwise similar construction with a wood deck and a wood handrail and steel painted guardrails. Here's that detail in the note. The South Bridge is a little smaller, or the North Bridge rather, at 50 feet and 6 feet wide. Both these bridges are constructed outside of the creek banks to allow for a contiguous natural edge along Minnehaha Creek. Avoiding trees and tree replacement was a big part of the project. Overall, there are 136 trees 8 inches or greater that will be removed as part of construction. 79 trees, 22 which are ash, will be actually impacted by construction. An additional 57 ash are removed pursuant to the city's desire to actively manage ash trees due to the ash tree decline as a result of emerald ash borer, which is in the city of Edina today. We're planting 407 trees, which will range in size, provided in a 10 to 15 inch container or balled and burlapped. There will be 10 about 20 foot tall specimen trees brought in by the city for some of the active park space. And there will be over 1,900 bare root trees incorporated into the project along the stream banks and within the slope along Brookview as part of the natural area management, which also includes buckthorn and invasive species management. Part of the project design includes replacement of the existing shelter. The City Council at their October 2nd meeting was asked to consider 2 shelter designs that were both contemplated as part of a shelter committee process implemented by the city. It included residents, city parks commissioners, and city staff. City Council directed staff to pursue the building form on the left, design 4C. And just to note, it's the form of the pitched roof that's really the focus here. This isn't a rendering, it's a building form. The building size is pretty small at 1,500 square feet. The direction from the residents was we'd rather have a smaller building with nicer finishes. So that was the direction of the council after that process. Now I'd like to switch gears into construction estimates, talk about how construction is phased and costs associated with that. In the cooperative agreement and as outlined in the packet, construction costs were allocated to the city and the district in 5 different categories. Park facilities and city trails, as I pointed out, are specifically city costs. Shared costs included that the crushed granite trail and the North Trail connection, which I said was a bid alternate, as well as the natural corridor restoration, the buckthorn management and the restoration of the area beyond Minnehaha Creek. Creek restoration, the assumptions in the agreement were the district pays for the creek restoration and then the creek access points and demo of the existing shelter building. This is the work being bid in phase 1. It's not the shelter building, but the shelter building pad, utilities, lighting, benches, and the playground container, and the rest of the work I described. So that's the project that's going out for bid, including the bid alternate of that North Trail Loop. The construction estimate is $3.6 million, the total number. The district cost of that estimate is $2,073,546. So I'll explain how that compares to total costs and with the bid alternate. Here, phase 1 construction without the bid alternate. You'll see the district and city costs and the total costs. Phase 1 construction with that North Trail alternate, you'll see adds up to the 3.6 I just showed you. Phase 2 includes the city's shelter building. It includes completion of the playground, including all the equipment and the exact playground surface, and some other park facility updates. And that cost estimate in phase 2, which is expected to begin sometime in the spring, is $1.2 million. The district does not have any costs in that phase 2. Phase 1 and 2 construction cost estimates looking at concept to today. You can compare what we expected to spend at concept and what we expect it is right now, including that trail we've been talking about and the city's expected construction cost estimates. At the time of the concept plan, there was a lot less certainty in the city facilities included in that estimate. Since the city was able to progress construction of those facilities on pretty much a parallel time frame, a lot more detail has been developed. Some large contributing numbers to that increase of city costs include an increase of the shelter budget and total replacement of the playground, which wasn't included in the initial concept phase. Looking at district 2019 budget assumptions with respect to what we expect to spend using the current construction cost estimates. And what I reported a month or 6 weeks ago was totally looking at about $160,000 shortfall in what we expect to spend. I think it's more like 194 after placing all of the bid items in their correct categories of work. My budget assumptions were low in one primary category of construction oversight, and then using a construction budget at 60% with contingency resulted was a bit lower than what we think it will cost. And this is using, this includes the bid alternate. So the bid alternate is $115,030. We will know exactly what how the costs compare to our 2019 budget when bids come in and final grants are known. So this is what we think are estimates and where we land. Next steps, the project gets released and published for bid tomorrow. The bid award is expected November 15th. With the slight delay in schedule, we are, the district is making the award recommendation contingent upon city acceptance of the bids as well at a following meeting. And this is, accommodating our meeting schedule and construction schedule to keep us on track. Our communications staff and the city's communications staff has been proactively planning for communication as we go out for bid and during construction. And I expect those updates will continue.
Does anyone have a motion to adopt Resolution 18105?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Seckelton. Are there questions for Ms. Clark here?
Uh,
We know this project, I guess.
Good work.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of work.
I was thinking that for every minute I spent reading this, there were hours behind it of everyone. Manager Loftus.
I was just going to ask Renee, she sent us an email of some information requests and some responses. And one of the things I heard you touch on a little bit was the tree replacement, which we've talked a lot about. But the difference between counting 8-inch trees or 4-inch trees. Can you talk about that more and what the numbers would look like if we were to consider 4-inch trees?
Sure.
Thank you.
Manager Loftus, managers, the decision to measure 8-inch trees was at the direction of, was following City of Edina tree ordinance, which considers a tree at 8 inches. And that's how the city did the tree survey, which contributed to the project. Considering trees between 4 and 8 inches, I would not be able to estimate that number. The city forester has advised that a lot of the smaller trees in that range are volunteer and are of lower quality. That's the information I have from the city forester and the justification for why we chose 8 inches.
And then did I hear you correctly that the replacement trees are of substantial size, the ones that are being counted in that table?
The 407 trees are of, I would ask my colleague, Ms. Damiancic, to maybe speak more specifically. Between a 10-inch pot and a 15-inch pot in bald and burlap, the size really depends on the species.
Sure.
And they're not a 4-inch tree or, larger. Ms. Damiancic has talked about with me the weighing cost of tree replacement and overall success rate when you're looking at a large volume of trees. Spading large trees can be successful, and the city of Edina has experience in spading large trees and being successful. Spading large trees, which the 10 significant trees we're bringing in are approximately $2,000 each, would just be really cost prohibitive. So in evaluating the shorter term impacts of tree loss in conjunction with the ash tree management and the project impacts and the long-term ecological benefits of the tree planting and the natural area management plan, there is a net benefit.
And I was a little confused on the comment about 1,900 saplings. Were those just spearing trees into the shoreline stabilization? Was that the
So bare
comment?
root trees are less than a sapling. They've got a root system and might be a couple of feet tall. They're very premature trees, but effective to do in large quantities, and especially
And those are being focused in the creek.
in the
not in
creek
the
corridor,
park
in the
junction.
creek corridor, and on the Brookside slope,
Okay.
where the majority of the buckthorn management is occurring.
Okay. Thank you.
Manager Shackleton.
I actually had a question about the 1900 bare root trees too, because I recognize that the bare root trees have a higher success rate than burlap trees. What kind of species are they? Is that a better question for?
Yeah. Managers,
Ms. Damiancic?
I'd ask Ms. Damiancic to join me.
And I guess as you're walking up, my questions really are like, what kind of trees and how are we going to ensure a tree that's this tall actually survives? Are we gonna like sleeve them or?
Sure. Manager Shelton, managers. The trees that we chose in terms of species for their root material are based on a plant survey, vegetation survey that we did in advance of the projects. We understood sort of what the existing canopy was like and what would we typically find in that woodland. White oak, bur oak, sugar maple, red maple, silver maple, 2 species of willows, hackberry, those kind of common typical upland woodland species. And then in terms of survival rate, the reason that we are doing such a high number and planting them in kind of a large area is because we expect that some will fail. There won't be specific browse protection on the bare root material. We're hoping that we get about 75% survival rate, and just the opportunity to cover a large area with a large number of trees, hopefully we'll get some survival out of that at a low cost.
Okay. May I ask, just out of curiosity, where are you sourcing the material? And I say it because like Hennepin County has a bare root nursery, and they did a market analysis and couldn't find a lot of providers.
Manager Shackleton, that'll be up to our contractor to source the material, which we'll be able to approve. But yes, Hennepin County has a nursery. The DNR has a number of state forestry nurseries also. So there is that material available. Also, a nursery, given advance warning that we'll need that kind of volume of material, we'll be able to grow some in the interim.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. Thank you both. Item 11.2, Resolution 18106, approval of the Golden Valley Local Water Management Plan. Ms. Clark again.
Managers, before you is the Golden Valley Local Water Management Plan. As typical, I'll provide a high-level review framework and process and the context for Golden Valley within our watershed district. Again, the district's comprehensive plan is really positioning the district as a partner rather than a regulator, and a primary focus of the local water plan are coordination plans to explain proactively how we will coordinate early on permitting, land use applications, and city CIPs, for example. Local water plans are required pursuant to state statute. Watershed districts have approval authority over them. They have some specific requirements of them, of which staff reviews them for completeness. The city of Golden Valley is located, I used an arrow for this one, is located with its portion within the watershed district is 80 acres. It's the southeast intersection of Highway 100 and 394. Whoops. Golden Valley drains to Brownie Lake and then to Cedar Lake. Brownie Lake has been taken off the impaired waters list due to some partnered work with the district and Duke Realty. There is still a chloride TMDL. The coordination plan, or the district's proposal to address chloride TMDLs, is primarily through education with our cities. The coordination plan from the City of Golden Valley focuses on early regulatory coordination as well as coordination of land use planning. However, the land use in Golden Valley is primarily single-family residential with about 3 parcels along 394 slated for a parking garage, which is currently underway. So with that, staff's recommendation is approval of the Golden Valley Local Water Management Plan.
Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 18106?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
I'll take Manager Becker. Are there questions for Ms. Clark? So we are we're acting to approve the plan, approve the associated coordination plan adopted, and with the understanding that the city will proceed apace.
Correct.
No questions? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will go out of order and take the administrator's report.
Very good. President White, managers, a couple of updates for you this evening. The Citizens Advisory Committee met last night. And as you know, they're working through elements of the strategic action plan over the next 6 to 12 months. So they're focusing on the permitting program, developing our responsive capital improvement programming. They'll be getting into our policy map and the policies that we want to influence with local land use, and eventually into strategic communications. They've been focused more immediately on permitting. They had their third meeting last night regarding the permitting program. Meeting one was all about the goals of, overhauling the permitting program, which are kind of twofold. Getting more efficient and streamlining our existing program, and then developing a framework to cultivate partnerships with the development and land use community. They grounded in goals. They moved into meeting two, looking at rules, and so they looked at a handful of rules and categorically identified issues, and they've started to identify and frame issues such as just the language, getting the rules into plain language, making sure the process for rule administration links better with municipal land use approval process. They've kind of picked apart how we have universal technical submittals, whereas all projects aren't universal, so we should have some custom tailoring of what's required based on projects. That maybe our rules aren't performance-based, and I think that kind of stems out of some of the technical submittals. And there's an interest in just talking about the scope of the rules. What's the broad net that we're casting with some of our regulations? Last night they moved into administrative processes, which isn't necessarily their bailiwick, but Tom and them wanted to walk through the current administration process, and they've boiled down the 100 or so steps I think it takes to run a variety of permits through the machine down to kind of 5 essential steps of permit administration, which then starts to map out what the key decision points for this organization are, how things get routed to the board, and that gives us some clarity on how we might link our process to land use. And also that's fundamental before we start looking at information technology needs. We want to know what we'd like our process to look like moving forward. So I think they're making good progress, and they're doing great work and really providing a lot of great advice early in the process here. I think the next meeting is going to focus on the other side of the permitting program, getting into compliance and field observation processes. And then they'll wrap that up with meeting 5, where they kind of package everything up with a neat little bow. This is going to be coming back to the board or the committee, the Planning and Policy Committee, at the next committee meeting in October. You'll get a briefing on this along with the actual strategic action plan. And then from there, we'll work through what the CAC has come up with before they move on to their next module. And then eventually, as you know, we'll be ready to start engaging our outside stakeholders, cities and the development community. So I think that's going well. If there's no questions about that, there's a variety of meetings.
I just have a comment.
Go ahead.
It's absolutely amazing amount of work that's been taken on to make the Citizens Advisory Committee an effective group. And it just, since Manager Becker pointed out that they were being abused by not being used, I guess is the best way to put it. I really want to commend the staff for the way they've taken on this project, and not only benefit the CAC's expertise, but really taken on some issues that need to be addressed. That the board, it wouldn't be appropriate for the board to take up board meetings for that. So I really think it's really good work.
Thank you,
and
thanks to Tom for doing such a good job on the front end. And we've been getting good positive feedback. We're now meeting monthly with CAC leadership. I kind of paired up with the monthly president's meeting, so we're planning their agendas in advance. We're getting regular feedback on how they think it's going. So I think we have a good pulse on it, and we seem to be getting some wind under our sails. Manager Shackleton mentioned the meeting that was at the other end of the district in Minneapolis with Hiawatha. Anna and I were at the other end of the district in Victoria last night, so we had 3 meetings last night for staff. The City of Victoria's Local Water Quality Advisory Committee met. This is an advisory committee that I think the mayor initiated, council supported several months ago. It's made up of membership from lakes, lake residents from the city. So we have representation from Auburn, Schutz, Wasserman, Pearson, Sunny, Zumbra, and Cray. And they've worked through a variety of different things so far, like shoreland ordinances, and they're really advising the city on sort of water resource work as the city's developing its comprehensive plan, but I think they plan on being in play longer than that. Last night, we were invited to discuss 6 Mile Creek, Halsted Bay. They wanted to get into the priorities and how they were set and how they might be set in the future. So it was an interesting conversation. We got there and we talked about why the state of Minnesota has watersheds, what the land use water governance gap is, what we've learned from our work in the Greenway, how we memorialized that into our 2017 plan, and the process that we ran engaging the City of Victoria, lake associations, and other cities, and the Carver County and Three Rivers and Hennepin County for the 6 Mile Creek, Halsted Bay. Anna reviewed all the projects that we have coming out of that work with downtown stormwater, the CARP work, Wasserman West, other projects are in the hopper, and we had a really lively discussion. And I think where that committee is going to be going in the future is obviously up to the city, but they talked about the idea of the city having reciprocity and coming the watershed's direction. So they recognize they're developing their comprehensive plan, and they really like this vision for the Western Growth Area, which you'll be receiving a presentation on the Planning and Policy Committee, of having public land on all of these lakes and then weaving that together with greenways. And that's a good vision for the comprehensive plan, but what they're starting to realize is without the land use tools to actually effectuate that, it's just vision. So they're thinking about teaming up with Planning Commission and Council and working closely with the district over the next year, kind of developing a process and a program to figure out what land use tools have to be in place in the city to accomplish the 6 Mile Creek, Halsted Bay plan from a municipal perspective rather than just watershed district investment. So lively discussion, I think pretty forward looking, and stay tuned, and I think Anna will give more of an update at the next committee meeting. As far as water levels, it might not seem like it, but most of the rain in the last couple days actually missed us. Reminds me of England, it's drizzling a lot. We've had about 1 to 2 inches across the metro. Nokomis Weir was opened because we've got a little bit of dry weather in the forecast over the next couple days or week or so. So we're doing well there. We're bringing the lake down. The elevation is currently at 815. For Minnetonka, we're at 928.5, so staff's up the discharge to 50 CFS in an effort to draw that down to 928.6 ahead of ice in, assuming it gets colder here pretty soon. Also down in Minneapolis, the multi-agency group that's been working on studying Nokomis, DNR, Hennepin County, Minneapolis Park and Rec Board, Minneapolis, and the district is hosting an open house meeting on Wednesday, October 24th at 6 to 8 p.m. Lyndhurst Recreation Center. I think Tiffany sent out information on that. We've been working with Minneapolis, the DNR, and everybody's communication staff to put together that Gov Delivery email, which is the central funnel for people that are interested in South Minneapolis water issues. That's where they'll get their regular feed. And that was sent out to people yesterday to sign up for those regular updates. The open house is going to involve a series of different stations where people can mill around and, depending on their interest, learn what's been studied to date and what's driving groundwater issues, as well as what's planned to be done about it. District's staff is going to be hosting the surface water station, so we'll be answering questions, of course, about creek flow and the Nokomis outfall and those sorts of things. Also, the park board is hosting an Experience the Creek event this Saturday, or this Sunday rather, October 14th, 11 to 2 p.m. It's on the south side of the creek between 51st and 52nd Streets, just south of Lyndhurst Park. This is all about getting feedback for the regional park master planning process. So they're going to be doing guided hikes, biking, art activities, to try and get feedback on the current master planning efforts. That's a little bit of a community engagement plan that the park board is running for that planning effort that we're involved in. And then on Saturday, this Saturday, October 13th, Great River Greening's doing a shrub planting volunteer event at our project, the Preserve, down in St. Louis Park. That's going to be 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. They're expecting about 100 volunteers, and they're going to be putting in about 600 shrubs. The planting locations have been coordinated by our staff to reestablish vegetation where we've done the buckthorn removal, so people that might have been through there in the last several months, you can see a lot more. A lot of the screening's gone. That's part of our plan for ongoing restoration of the buckthorn that's been removed over the last couple of years. And that volunteer event is a result of the Lessard Sands Outdoor Heritage Council funding that we were able to piggyback on through Great River Greening. So we provided some match, Great River Greening got the funding, and they'll be doing that work this Saturday.
Can I ask a question on,
Yeah.
I was over there the other day, and the Meadowbrook Manor has got a major water treatment facility going in. It looked, it was on top of the hill on the south or northwest corner, and it was a major piece of construction. What prompted that?
I have no idea what that's about. I don't know if Laura, Mike, Renee, we'll have to look into that. I'll find out, and I'll send an email out.
You know Meadowbrook Manor has been sold.
Huh?
Meadowbrook Manor has been sold.
To their son, yeah.
Yeah.
I am not sure what that is, so we'll be able to find out and follow up.
Okay. It was a pretty impressive project.
Well, we'll check that out. Also, kind of the final note here is the Master Water Stewards recruitment period that was open has closed. We've got a cohort of about 10 individuals, 4 from Minneapolis, 6 west of 494, Wayzata, Excelsior, Mound, Minnetonka. So the program's creeping west. I think most of the folks in the past have been down in Minneapolis. They're going to be doing a 50-hour program, and staff is working with Freshwater Society, who we partner on with that program, to kind of rehab the curriculum. And they're going to be enhancing the program to really focus on the district's vision, mission, balanced urban ecology, so that gets woven into the Master Water Stewards program. And then they're working on kind of the long-term, how do we use the Master Water Stewards with our communities once they're trained up. So there's a little bit of information there about the Water Stewards program, and that is what I have.
I got a
Unless
comment
there's
on
questions.
that, if I could.
Go ahead.
It seems to me that we should make sure that they're informed enough on our projects that they're advocates for them. And there's been some projects recently that we've been involved in that they weren't informed about, and they were commenting as experts because they were water stewards in opposing our plans because they weren't informed about the details of it. I wonder if we could do a kind of a semi-annual education program with all the water steward graduates on what we're doing, and keep them informed and have them be in a position to be positive commentators of our projects.
Mr. Whisker.
Manager Miller, managers, that's a good idea and one that staff's already kind of batted around. We've got 2 programs with Freshwater Society, and Kim LeBeau is kind of working with the Watershed Association Initiative, which are the lake associations, and Darren is really manning up the Master Water Stewards, and both of them essentially sat down with Freshwater and are auditing the program and how it works for them and their mission alignment and how it works with us and sort of long-term what we both need out of the program. And both of those ideas have been tossed around in terms of creating an alumni, essentially, where you get everybody together, share lessons learned. They maintain contact and context with the district, and then also doing that in a way that the Master Water Stewards and Watershed Association Initiative, the lake associations, aren't separate programs. I mean, they're both education and sort of activating human assets out in the community, and we're looking at how those connect. So that's a good idea, and I think once that work is done with Freshwater and we have a better idea of what's working and what we might want to tweak in the future, that's something that we'll bring back to the board and provide information on ahead of any new contracts.
I see that the Freshwater too has their anniversary event,
50th,
our next meeting.
yeah.
It conflicts with our next meeting, so that's too bad, but
Yeah, I forget to send that out.
Kudos to them.
Thanks for the reminder.
for their anniversary. Then we will move to item 12.1, and the redevelopment sale of 325 Lake Road property. I would like a motion to move into closed session to discuss the value of this property for sale, 325 Lake Road in Hopkins. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I move to go into closed session, discuss the sale of 325 Lake Road property.
Manager Jacqueline, is there a second? Second. Manager Becker. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.